Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So, over the weekend, a document from the FAA was leaked onto the internets, and Forbes is actually the one that wound up making it known, at least known to me, that the document had been leaked. They posted an article, and they are credited by, I believe it's the Washington Post and UPI, both as being the source of revealing this leaked document. And some of the things that the document does is it lays out what the regulations, the proposed regulations by the FAA are to be in regards to what are commonly called drones. Now, I don't necessarily like calling them drones just because drone has the negative connotation associated with military use, flying these basically remote-controlled airplanes around and shooting missiles at people. That's what I think of when I hear drone. What they are talking about, the FAA actually refers to as a UAS, which is an unmanned aerial, or rather unmanned aircraft system. UAS. I've also heard the term UAV, which is unmanned aerial vehicle. The FAA also talks about SUAS, which would be small unmanned aircraft systems, and the SUASs would be things that weigh less than 4 pounds. But when they're talking about the UAS, or what Forbes here refers to throughout their article as a drone, it is basically a remote control, either helicopter, quadcopter, aircraft, etc., that weighs less than 55 pounds and is to be used for commercial purposes. There are already regulations, and I did not know this. There are already regulations in place for recreational use of, the UAS, the drone, remote control helicopters, remote control airplanes. The regulations that are in place for recreational use is that the craft does not go above 500 feet above ground level. And, we could argue all day about what does that actually mean. Does that mean the spot from which I am standing? Does it mean the average elevation in the area where I am? Or does it mean 500 feet above wherever the aircraft is at the moment? And I realize that it sounds as though I'm, nitpicking here, but in some way I kind of am. So let's say that someone goes to the Grand Canyon and they decide to fly one of these drones, for lack of a better term. Well, there are better terms, but, instead of me using the acronym every time I talk about it. So if somebody goes to the Grand Canyon and they fly one of these drones that has a camera mounted to it, and they decide, I want to take pictures of the Grand Canyon using this drone. Now, they're standing, in my scenario here, they would be standing on the rim, at the top of the canyon, and they're flying this down into the canyon. Now, are they flying it below ground level or above ground level? Because obviously there's ground below where they are. The base of the canyon is, a lot lower than the rim. I forget the actual number of feet, but, it's a lot lower. So if you're flying this from one side of the canyon to the other, at some point that will wind up being way over 500 feet above the ground that is immediately below the drone. So that's just one of the concerns about the way they have this thing worded. And also, there are regulations that are proposed for commercial purposes that would require someone to go take tests from the FAA and prove that they know how to basically operate the thing. And it's going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of like $300 for the application fee, the testing fee, and then the actual permit. I get to operate a remote control airplane for commercial purposes. And then the FAA, in their 79-page document, they actually have a table. And I'm very surprised because generally government agencies don't tell you how much it's going to cost to comply with their regulations. But the FAA has this in their table or in their document. It's a table showing the cost of regulatory compliance. And the FAA estimates that it's going to be about $6,800 per year of regulatory compliance. So that is info from me based on things that I've gathered from reading over the 79-page document and reading other sources that have read a little more in-depth than I. Now to the article from Forbes. And I just want to stress again, the $6,800 per year cost of regulatory compliance listed in the FAA document. From Forbes, quote, the FAA appears poised to release regulations that will impose a minimal burden on businesses, paving the way for integration of drones into the national airspace. End quote for the first sentence. Now, someone please tell me how $6,800 per year is a minimal burden to small businesses. It seems to me that small businesses would wind up saying, you know what, I can't afford to comply with this. And there are a lot of people that would want to make use of this. But the $6,800 cost of regulatory compliance, that according to the FAA, that cost is going to basically make them either violate the law or not opt to use aerial photography in their job. One thing that I can think of off the top of my head where aerial photography is currently being used in violation of FAA regulations is wedding photography and event photography. So, somebody wants good overhead shots of an outdoor wedding. You fly one of these remote control airplanes and it, is set to take pictures every couple of seconds, whatever. Well, right now, you can't do that because there's FAA regulations saying that you can't use a drone for commercial purposes. This goes through, there's going to be a lot of people that do jump through the hoops. And then you're going to have what a lot of people refer to as slave-on-slave violence, to where you have, let's again use the wedding photographer as an example. You have one wedding photographer that has jumped through the hoops and the hurdles, gotten the license to be able to fly his remote control airplane over the weddings, take pictures. You've got another wedding photographer who's doing it without the license. The photographer that jumped through the hoops, he's going to start calling the FAA, hey, my competition doesn't have your license. Come shut him down. We'll get into this a little bit more when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Davi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Davi Barker will be available on February 19th. ExpressCoin is the best choice for buying Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, and more. ExpressCoin prides themselves on their customer service, so much so that the back end on the website should allow them to be even more focused on your needs. Get your cryptocurrencies with money order, check, wire transfer, or cash deposit. Get started at expresscoin.fppradio.com. That's expresscoin.fppradio.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for t-shirts, precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. There's an Amazon shopping iframe built into the website, or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. That's shop.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. We're talking about drones. The good kind. Not the evil, horrible drones that get used by the military that kill innocent people every day. No, we're talking about commercial use of drones and the proposed rules from the FAA. The article from Forbes continues. It says information about the forthcoming regulations is contained in an inadvertently published document that appears to be an FAA economic analysis of the long-awaited regulations for small drones. In no uncertain terms, the purported FAA economic analysis assumes that drones provide great social and economic benefit, will save lives, and will be integrated into the national airspace with minimal risk while providing benefits that far outweigh the cost. Less burdensome regulations and a recognition of the benefits of drones is a reversal from what many observers, including the author of this article, believed the FAA would do. The economic analysis suggests that the forthcoming regulations may allow for many beneficial drone uses across a variety of industries. The analysis also indicates that ensuring that the potential of drones can be realized will be a key driver behind the final regulations. Now, let me skip down just a little bit here because they talk about someone from a website called regulations.gov, or rather someone who downloaded the document from regulations.gov, his thoughts on it. And at first, he actually didn't realize the significance of the document, and he decided to share it on social media, and then other people realized what it was, and then somehow Forbes got a copy of it, and I have actually posted a copy of this on fpp.cc. So the article here continues. It says, a small note of caution. As stated earlier, the document appears to be the economic analysis of the proposed SUAS rules. The document is dated February 2015 and is captioned, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking Regulatory Evaluations, Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems, authored by George Thurston of the Office of Aviation Policy and Plan's Economic Analysis Division. But it's possible that this leaked early draft has since been revised or otherwise incomplete or inaccurate. With that caveat, we continue. And the reason that they mention that it could have been revised is because almost immediately after it was uploaded and someone downloaded it, the website where it was shown removed it from the listing. So it's possible that what I have seen is not the actual regulation that is to be rolled out by the FAA. So Forbes writes, here are 9 key takeaways regarding how the proposed FAA regulations will handle drones. The FAA believes drones provide great social and economic benefit. The agency admits that drones provide significant social benefit and that the social benefits will continue to increase as entrepreneurs enter the drone marketplace. The agency noted that if the use of small drones replaces a dangerous non-drone operation and saves one human life, that savings alone would result in benefits that outweigh the expected cost of integration of drones into the national airspace. Specifically, the agency found that integrating small drones into the national airspace will have an economic impact of greater than $100 million per year in benefits. The FAA sees great upside potential in aerial photography, precision agriculture, search and rescue / law enforcement, and bridge inspection. specifically noting that nearly 45,000 bridge inspections could be conducted by drones each year. The agency estimated that a mere $5 per acre of cost reduction, drones in precision agriculture could produce billions of dollars per year in cost savings. For operators that can't afford to purchase their own drone or train their personnel to operate them, there will be a market for end users to seek contracted UAS services. And then they write full disclosure. As of February 12th, I began collaborating with Measure, a company that provides drone services on a contract basis. Now, one thing that I find interesting, the FAA specifically lists 4 markets where they think that the use of drones would have potential. Those, again, are aerial photography, precision agriculture, which was gone into a little bit in detail here by Forbes, search and rescue / law enforcement uses, and bridge inspection. Notice what is not on the list. Not on the list is media. And the FAA document actually includes that in sort of a paragraph of, here's a list of things that will not be benefited by these regulations because of the line of sight requirement. Meaning that whoever's operating the remote control airplane, remote control helicopter, quadcopter, whatever it is, whoever is operating that must be in the line of sight of the craft. Meaning that if it flies behind a tree, technically you are in violation of the regulations, and that could potentially wind up costing you your drone operator license. If you wind up flying it and it lands on the other side of a building, then technically you are in violation of the line of sight requirement. If it flies out of the view to where you can no longer see it, then you are in violation, and you could wind up losing your drone operator license. Now, one of the things that they give as possibilities for aerial photography is real estate agents that wish to do overhead photos of real estate, but they don't mention the wedding photographer, and I know that that's something that drones are currently being used for. There's also, remember last year, it was last spring when I talked about the Washington Nationals baseball team that was using a drone to take action photos of spring training, and they wound up getting a cease and desist order from the FAA. That is also something that could wind up being done. And yes, I realize that's part of the aerial photography, but there are just so many different aspects of aerial photography. But media, while, yes, they would be, doing, actually, I guess media would be doing more videography than photography, but that is something that it's one of these fields that it seems as though the FAA is intentionally preventing from being used. Remember the Ferguson riots that happened in August, September, October of last year, and there were journalists that were getting arrested, journalists that were getting shot with beanbags and tear gas from police. There were even journalists that were being threatened with death. There was Officer Go F Yourself was the nickname he wound up receiving after he shouted to some journalists and some protesters, "I will effing kill you." Someone said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Go F Yourself." So he was then given the name Officer Go F Yourself. So instead of putting journalists in harm's way, media outlets could have, in theory, flown drones over the protests to get a better view. But I think there probably would be a problem with that, and I'll explain that when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and Numery supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So what could possibly prevent news media, or assuming that FAA regulations allowed news media to use drones to cover events, what could have prevented drones from being used to cover the Ferguson riots? Well, there was this little thing called the no-fly zone that was implemented to prevent media helicopters from flying over the protest and getting aerial photography that way. So I'm fairly certain that, had these regulations been in place and not included the line of sight requirement, that news organizations would have, like the News 9 drone, and it would just fly over and get video. But because of the no-fly zone that was put in place over Ferguson, I'm fairly certain that that would have been construed to include remote control airplanes that had cameras attached to them. So that, in and of itself, would have prevented the use of drones by the media to cover that riot. In Keene, New Hampshire, back in October, there was the Pumpkin Riots, and a lot of people went down with video cameras to record what was going on. At one point, the rioters started chanting, "F the press," and several members of the independent media wound up leaving at that point because they feared for their safety. But, a remote-controlled helicopter, remote-controlled quadcopter with a video camera on it would have allowed them, a safe way to record what was going on. Safe in theory. Obviously somebody throwing beer bottles could have thrown a beer bottle at the drone and knocked it out of the sky and wound up hurting somebody. But, that could happen anyway with people throwing beer bottles. Somebody could have got hurt, and there actually were several people that did wind up getting hurt. But I just think it's interesting, again, that these regulations are written in such a way as to where they exclude a very valuable part of society from being able to use drones in the performance of their jobs. And these regulations would also wind up preventing Amazon from doing something that they've wanted to do for several years now, and that is deliver packages with drones. Yep, sorry, Amazon, can't do it. The next thing on the list of 9 key takeaways regarding how the proposed FAA regulations will handle drones, they write, drones will save lives. The FAA assumes drones will provide safety benefits by allowing the substitution of drones for operations that pose a higher level of public risk. Climbers working on towers have a fatality rate that is 10 times that of construction workers, and drones can help reduce those fatalities. For example, 95 climbers working on cell and other towers died between 2004 and 2012. If drones had been available for those inspections, those fatalities could have been avoided. Skipping down because I do want to wind up getting through all of these, the FAA will not require a commercial pilot certificate for drone operators. The FAA originally considered considered requiring drone pilots to obtain a commercial pilot certificate, have a Class II medical certificate, pass an aerial knowledge test, and demonstrate flight proficiency and aeronautical experience before a certified flight instructor. The FAA determined that drones pose a low level of public risk and that imposing all those requirements would be unduly burdensome. Instead, the FAA will only require an operator to pass an aeronautical knowledge test before obtaining an unmanned aircraft operator certificate, and that knowledge test will need to be taken at a certified testing site in person every 2 years, and they are not allowing online testing, and the cost of the test and the application fee will be less than $300. But again, that's just part of the nearly $6,800 of yearly regulatory compliance. Also, the person using the drone would have to have the drone inspected by the FAA. It would have to be registered with the FAA, and it would have to get some kind of a tail number in order to be flown. And presumably there would have to be regular safety checks of the drone, where right now with airplanes, commercial airplanes, you keep logs of all of the safety checks that get done. There's pre-flight and post-flight checks that happen, and all of those are logged. I don't think it's going to necessarily be that burdensome for the drones, but there will be some safety requirements for inspections. The FAA decided to accommodate all types of drone businesses by adopting the least complex set of regulations across all sizes and categories of drones. And no, Mr. Reporter at Forbes, they did not accommodate all types of drone businesses. And no, they did not adopt the least complex set of rules. They could have said anybody can use it for any reason, no license, no paperwork, no nothing. But that's not what they did. They implemented regulations, and they did so in a way that it will harm, specifically, it will harm media, it will harm package delivery companies. The FAA's 79-page document also mentions the inspection of like high-altitude power lines in rural areas, so such as in northern New Hampshire. You have these really big power lines that just go through the middle of the mountains, and they go for a long ways, and those have to be inspected every so often. And because they are so remote, generally somebody in a helicopter will fly near them and do the visual inspection that way. That seems like a perfect job for a drone, but because of the visual line of sight requirement, nope, can't do it. Sorry. The next thing that Forbes says we should take away is that the FAA considered but rejected onerous inspections, maintenance, and permitting requirements for drones. The agency determined that such requirements were not proportionate to the risk posed by small drones. The FAA specifically noted that the light weight of drones versus manned aircraft means the drones pose significantly lower risk. As such, the FAA believes that inspection and maintenance of small drones pursuant to existing regulations would not result in significant safety benefits. While inspection, maintenance, and permitting requirements will not be required, the FAA notes that statutory constraints will require unmanned aircraft to be registered. The registration fee will cost $5 and need to be renewed every 3 years. And there was a little bit more about the registration and inspection in the document. I don't recall exactly what it was, but I know it's more than just give them $5 and tell them the thing. But yes, they did reject some of the more onerous inspection requirements. The next thing on the list, The FAA will require drones to be operated within line of sight, which is something that I had already mentioned. Drones will need to take place between sunrise and sunset. That's actually not what it says. They considered that, but went away from it. Drones will have to be at less than 500 feet. And they also talk about less burdensome requirements, but they're very burdensome. This has been Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Don't forget, every Wednesday is the Ask Me Anything, AMA at FPPradio.com.